Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. Let me introduce myself. It's already done. Together with Mrs. Josina Kamerling in the first row here, we are the co-presidents of the jury of the prize Ethics and Trust in Finance. This prize was established in 2006 in Geneva. We are honored here to be here in this auditorium, and in the very first place I would express our deepest thanks to the friendly support of the governor of the Banque de France, François Villeroy de Galhau, and to the Banque de France as an institution. This support was critical in allowing the present ceremony to take place. The governor will give his keynote address in a few minutes. Our warmest thanks go also to Mr. Angel Gurria, the Secretary General of OECD, who will be speaking just after the governor, for having immediately accepted our invitation to address this audience, particularly the laureates of the 6th edition of Ethics and Trust in Finance Global Prize. We are honored to work, we are here, and the laureates are here, to honor the work of about 100 young people around the world who devoted time, energy, and effort to write and submit essays on the role of ethics and trust in finance. Among them, the distinguished jury, few members of it are here, selected for papers of utmost interest. The laureates of today are then the representatives of their generation who really care about making the world better and our economy and finance truly serve society and the human person. So let you join me with the applause for the laureates and for this young generation they represent. With the 6th edition, the prize is about to close its first decade. It's entering the second. Together with Mrs. Carol Cosgrove-Sachs, we started in 2005 before the crisis erupted. At that time, the prize was named after her son, Robin Cosgrove Prize. The prize in its own history is a lesson of optimism, an illustration how a tragedy can be overcome and made to bear fruits. Indeed, you may know that Robin Cosgrove was working in the early 2000s in hedge funds in London and Tokyo when he died in a hiking accident. But a few days before his accident, he shared with his mother concerns about the state of mind and morality of the financial industry. After his death, Carol Cosgrove took the mission to enhance the role of ethics and trust in finance, and we started together the prize. The 6th edition has been largely made possible thanks to the support of our strategic partners. In the first place, the strategic partners, CFI Institute with Josina Kamerling, and also Euroclear with Stéphane Bernard, who should be here.
He will be arriving shortly.
Okay. But it would never happen without the support and commitment of 4 young people. On the first place, Anna Soisson, Nati Garcia, both from the Observatoire de la Finance, Eve Lacombez from CFA Institute, and Martin Gregson from Euroclear. Let's take this opportunity to express our warmest thanks to them and also our congratulations. The success of the laureates is also the success of the team. I have to underline that the prize is run with very limited resources. The chairs, the jury, and many other people are giving their time for free, absolutely for free. We all, including the laureates, have to be thankful for this. And at the end of the day, edition after edition, we managed to gather $20,000, which will be shortly distributed among the laureates. Just a few minutes of patience, dear laureates. The jury has worked in 3 steps and it finalized with a meeting in London in November. One of the very interesting aspects of the prize is that edition after edition, we have about the same amount of entries coming from the professional world and coming from the academic world. We have a balance, gender balance, which is more than respectful, and we have entries coming from about 50 countries around the world. From one edition to the other, essays submitted offer a thematic panorama of what the young generation is preoccupied with and in which domains they see the problems of ethics and trust. In the 6th edition, 3 different key subjects came up. First, fintech and all that is related to technology, with the main question, can technology substitute ethics or have it to be harnessed by ethics? The second theme that we have seen in many papers is the declining trust with industries that manipulate big amounts of client data. Finance is part of this concern. And finally, a third group of papers that we have been reading has to do about the solution. What should be done? Thank you very much. What could and should be done? And among the things, one of the proposals that we took very seriously is to put together a massive open access course about ethics in finance. The best way for you to understand where are the concerns of the young generation is to read the selected essays, and when you leave the room you will receive a booklet with all these essays, and if you need complementary copies, please ask for them. Closing, the 6th edition coincides almost perfectly with the pre-launch of the edition number 7, which will finalize in 2 years from now. We hope to be able to launch it by the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg next May. And for the 7th edition, we have some ambitions planned. We would like to expand the number of linguistic chapters, revive the Ibero-American chapter that was working during the first 4th prizes, build a chapter for German-speaking authors, and also one from La Francophonie. The winning papers in these local competitions are then translated and join the global contest, as it is the case today with the Polish chapter. Indeed, our experience and some elements of research show that deep ethics, as opposed to just compliance, requires linguistic competence, and English is not necessarily the only language and the language that fits all sizes. So we intend, as suggested before, to go also in the direction of a MOOC on ethics and trust in finance. We need to achieve this, we need a couple of additional strategic partners in academia, in public bodies, in business. I'm sure that you will not leave this call for cooperation and support unanswered. And now, it is my honor and pleasure to invite, he is at his place, the Governor of Banque de France, to deliver his keynote address. Monsieur le Gouverneur, vous avez la parole.
Good evening to you all. Thank you very much, dear Paul Dembitsky, for these kind words. It is my pleasure to welcome you and all of you here in this auditorium, and it is our honor, dear Angel, to welcome the Secretary General of the OECD. If I'm right, it's the first time you will speak here in this new auditorium, but as you know, you are most welcome at the Banque de France, and we measure our privilege. As the Secretary General speaks all languages worldwide, you will just see it, he will probably speak in English. Alors je vais parler en français un petit peu, et beaucoup d'entre vous parlent bien cette belle langue, et nous sommes à Paris. Bienvenue à vous tous dans ce lieu qui est déjà un message. Vous êtes donc à la Banque de France, et d'une certaine façon à l'autorité de contrôle prudentiel et de résolution, la CPR, qui lui est adossée. Or, certains peuvent avoir tendance à penser que le superviseur bancaire et d'assurance, la CPR, en tant que gardien du temple, ne s'intéresserait qu'aux règles prudentielles qui sont collectives et obligatoires. Et que le même superviseur considérerait que l'approche éthique, de son côté, est trop imprécise pour être contrôlée, puisqu'elle est propre à chaque établissement financier, voire à chaque professionnel, et qu'elle laisse la liberté de veiller soi-même aux intérêts des clients. Les philosophes parmi vous, il en est peut-être, auront reconnu dans cette divergence entre règles et éthique l'opposition classique entre l'impératif catégorique selon Kant et la sagesse pratique selon Aristote. Mais j'ai la conviction que dans la vraie vie, dans le secteur financier comme dans la vie sociale en général, il faut respecter les règles et se comporter de manière éthique. Même quand on respecte les règles. De nombreuses affaires qui ont récemment défrayé la chronique ont d'ailleurs montré que les exigences des citoyens et des clients sont de plus en plus grandes en matière d'éthique, qui est votre sujet aujourd'hui. Et donc je voudrais, dans ce propos introductif, essayer d'éclairer un peu deux questions. Quelle est la tension dynamique entre règles et éthique? Et comment, deuxième question, l'éthique peut-elle irriguer les pratiques quotidiennes et la culture des établissements financiers? Je l'ai dit, plus qu'une opposition, ce qui est en cause, c'est un bon équilibre, une tension dynamique entre règles obligatoires et éthique volontairement consentie dans la durée. Sans aucun doute, le secteur financier a besoin de règles. Il s'agit d'un métier d'intermédiation entre différentes parties qui doivent être assurées des règles appliquées, d'autant qu'il s'agit de gérer des risques. L'instabilité financière a en outre des externalités considérables sur l'économie et la cohésion sociale à travers le chômage. Les récentes crises financières l'ont malheureusement mis en évidence, sans oublier aujourd'hui l'impact des nouvelles technologies telles que le trading à haute fréquence, les fintechs ou les cryptoactifs comme le Bitcoin dont on parle beaucoup. Mais, les règles ne peuvent pas tout. La démarche éthique est nécessaire pour respecter l'esprit des règles, au-delà de leur respect purement formel, ou pour prendre des décisions avisées en l'absence de règles claires. Il est intéressant de relire cette tension entre règles et éthique au vu des 10 dernières années. Clairement, la crise de 2007-2009 est en partie née d'un déséquilibre. Trop de confiance avait alors été accordée à l'éthique, alors que les règles étaient insuffisantes. Les faiblesses de la culture d'entreprise des établissements financiers sont apparues en pleine lumière, les incitations à prendre des risques étaient trop fortes et la gouvernance inadaptée. Et pour reprendre un certain nombre d'expressions anglo-saxonnes qui illustrent bien cette période, le too big to fail a généré un hasard moral généralisé, le tick the box a favorisé une autorégulation trop laxiste sous couvert d'un respect purement formel des règles, et ce faisant, la light touch de certaines autorités, comme la FSA britannique, a clairement montré ses limites. Depuis la crise, nous avons beaucoup et heureusement renforcé ensemble les règles. Avec la directive relative aux exigences de fonds propres pour les banques, dite CRD4 en Europe, et BAL 3, nous venons d'arriver à un accord international, et pour les assurances, au moins en Europe, avec Solvabilité 2. En outre, la gouvernance des établissements financiers est améliorée et les politiques de rémunération des banquiers sont un peu mieux encadrées. La régulation internationale est sans aucun doute notre bien commun aujourd'hui. Elle renforce la solidité du système financier. Mais le renforcement bienvenu de cette régulation internationale ne doit pas conduire à baisser la garde en matière d'éthique qui ferait naître, 10 ans après, un déséquilibre inverse à celui de 2007-2008. il y a, si vous me permettez l'expression, le risque d'un retour de balancier qui avait été très loin vers l'éthique et assez loin des règles avant 2007 et qui pourrait aujourd'hui, avec un renforcement bienvenu des règles, oublier un peu la nécessité de l'éthique. Ceci m'amène à ma deuxième question sur l'irrigation nécessaire par l'éthique des pratiques quotidiennes des établissements financiers et de leur culture. Alors, il y a des bonnes intentions, il y a des déclarations, il y a des codes de conduite qui n'ont pas empêché, je l'ai dit, les dérives à l'origine de la crise de 2008. L'enjeu concret, c'est l'appropriation à présent de l'éthique par tous les acteurs, de la base au sommet des établissements. Il y a à cet égard un rapport très intéressant du G30 qui réunit, comme vous le savez, des banquiers privés, des banquiers centraux et des universitaires. Le rapport s'appelle Banking Conduct and Culture et je le résume d'une phrase, le tone from the top doit recevoir un echo from the bottom. Ceci signifie, tone from the top, en premier lieu que les dirigeants et les managers doivent être constamment exemplaires, qu'ils doivent bien comprendre que leurs comportements sont observés en permanence et qu'ils donnent des signes de ce qu'il est admis de faire ou de ne pas faire au-delà de leurs déclarations d'intention. Pour le dire autrement, les actes comptent plus que les paroles, notamment ceux des dirigeants. Mais echo from the bottom, cela signifie ensuite que les salariés doivent être sensibilisés et formés régulièrement en matière d'éthique et pas seulement lors de leur recrutement. Le contexte change, l'actualité peut être l'occasion de réfléchir aux pratiques nouvelles. L'éthique doit faire l'objet d'une communication soutenue et d'une formation continue au même titre que les sujets techniques. Et c'est loin d'être facile. Je vais citer là un autre rapport qui vient de l'Observatoire de la responsabilité sociétale des entreprises, un rapport sur éthique, responsabilité et stratégie d'entreprise. La phrase est simple, mais je crois qu'elle est profondément vraie. L'éthique d'entreprise n'est pas basée sur l'obéissance, mais sur l'adhésion et le discernement. Les salariés doivent donc être en mesure d'identifier les zones grises éthiques, même en l'absence de leur manager, même en l'absence de règles claires. Et pour irriguer les pratiques, l'éthique doit être une partie intégrante des politiques et dispositifs RH. Ainsi, lors des procédures de sélection en vue de recrutement externe ou de promotion interne, en particulier vers des fonctions managériales, l'intégrité passée des candidats doit être évaluée sérieusement et prise en compte. L'éthique est une valeur en soi. Les performances ne peuvent pas compenser ni excuser un comportement critiquable sur le plan éthique. Des résultats qui seraient obtenus ou auraient été obtenus au détriment de l'éthique ne devraient pas être récompensés et, au contraire, devraient être sanctionnés. La diversité des équipes, et particulièrement des équipes de direction, devrait être favorisée. L'expérience montre que la diversité, qu'elle concerne le genre, l'origine sociale, les études, la manière de penser, est un facteur de prévention des risques et d'enrichissement de la culture d'entreprise. Un groupe trop homogène ne discute pas, perd son sens critique et prend de ce fait des décisions plus risquées. Alors que les processus techniques et les procédures de conformité sont de plus en plus complexes et privilégient ce qu'on appelle parfois le dialogue homme-machine, il faut bien sûr redonner toute sa place au contact humain direct. Laissez-moi souligner à ce propos une règle très simple de bonne gestion des entreprises et des organisations publiques. Les salariés doivent pouvoir poser des questions d'éthique à leurs managers, au même titre qu'ils peuvent aborder des questions techniques ou professionnelles, avec la même facilité, avec la même liberté, avec la même légitimité. Personne ne devrait craindre de soulever des questions éthiques, de s'interroger sur certaines pratiques ou de lancer une alerte éthique, ce qui est désormais protégé par la loi en France depuis la loi dite Sapin 2. Parallèlement à ce canal RH, l'irrigation de l'éthique dans les pratiques et les cultures d'entreprise passe par son intégration dans la stratégie, dans son pilotage et dans son contrôle par ce qu'on appelle quelquefois les 3 lignes de défense. En premier lieu, la ligne managériale, ensuite les responsables de l'éthique et de la conformité, et enfin l'audit. Pour ma part, et j'en conclurai par là, je suis convaincu qu'à long terme, FX pays, comme disent les anglo-saxons, même si ce n'est pas toujours au sens immédiatement sonnant et trébuchant. C'est en faisant prévaloir l'éthique comme valeur désirable en soi que l'on obtiendra le bon mix entre la régulation et l'éthique nécessaires à la solidité du système financier. Et c'est bien pour cela que votre prix d'aujourd'hui, cher Paul, n'est pas étranger à la Banque de France et à la CPR. Je vous souhaite une excellente réunion à la Banque de France. Merci.
Thank you very much, Governor, for these very strong words, and that somewhere show the road that we should follow in the prize for the next editions, and also in the activity that is aimed at enhancing the ethics as a complement to technicalities, as a fellow traveler of technicalities, not as a substitute for it, but the two have to be carried in at the level of culture, at the level of institutions, and at the level of individual behaviors. So let me now ask Mr. Angel Gurria to join the podium. Since 2006, you have been at the helm of OECD, so the crisis, financial crisis, met you almost when you were entering the place. You turned the OECD into a think tank for G20, and we see every day the effects of it, and we thank you very much for giving this attention to young people and joining this meeting and delivering your keynote address. Thank you very much, Mr. Gouy.
Monsieur le gouverneur, mesdames, messieurs, messieurs les ambassadeurs, mesdames les ambassadrices, et nos amis, merci pour l'accueil, monsieur le gouverneur. Je sais que votre emploi du temps exige que vous partez, mais je dois dire que c'est un grand honneur, c'est un grand plaisir revisiter la Banque de France, mais adresser cette collective dans cet auditoire physiquement pour la première fois. I am delighted to address the 6th edition of the Ethics and Trust in Finance Global Prize ceremony. And let me congratulate the finalists for their groundbreaking essays. It is inspiring, but also comforting to see that these gifted young people are engaging in winning back the trust in finance, which is one of the great legacies of the crisis, one of the great, actually, losses of the crisis. We can go nowhere without trust. Trust supports most, if not all, collective and individual human interactions, from finance and trade to welfare systems and education. Yet, trust was a badly hit victim of the financial crisis, and unfortunately, so far, shows little sign of recovering. Even as some aspects of the economy improve, the question of the recovery of trust seems to be lagging behind. Trust in government is particularly low. In the OECD countries, only 4 out of 10 citizens trust their governments. Now, trust in business is a little better, at about half. Actually, 53% last year, and 52%, actually 53% in 2016, 52% last year. So it's not going in the right direction, but anyway, it's kind of a slightly above half, which is better than 40%. But it's a problem. It's one of the very clear, it's not just a legacy, but a very unfortunate consequence, because the governance, the selling of the reforms become, some of them outright necessary because of the crisis itself, becomes so much more difficult. Now, we've witnessed a string of high-profile misconduct cases in major financial institutions, even after the crisis. Despite the massive financial sector support programs put in place by governments and extensive new financial rules, extensive new financial regulations, the LIBOR and foreign exchange rate manipulations make clear that serious conduct problems had persisted in the economy, in the industry. Even after the LIBOR manipulation was revealed, then manipulation of foreign exchange rates continued. And taxes, data, the fintech excesses, let's say, the Bitcoin. And here we're talking about things that may or may not be intrinsically wrong, but basically they're challenging simply because people do not understand them. And given the background, then they tend to distrust. Why? Because trust was a casualty of the crisis. Now, because of the essential role played by the financial system in the economy, in the society, and of the guarantees bestowed by the state about the running of the financial system, both explicit and implicit, of the role of central banks, banking regulators, the EC, the European banking authorities, the ECB, etc. The too big to fail exercise. The public simply places a very high ethical bar on financial institutions. The expectations, in a way, are higher, perhaps because there are so many of the well-respected institutions, like central banks, around the financial industry. And therefore, they expect a higher, perhaps better, performance. A culture of integrity is essential to a well-functioning financial system and a more inclusive economy. This is why we at the OECD have tried to identify which are the elements which will rebuild trust. And we found the rebuilding of trust as crucial to the recovery of the post-crisis economy. Financial institutions, as asset managers and lenders, they have an important role to play in promoting responsible business conduct amongst their clients and their investee companies. However, many financial institutions continue to exclude, for example, environmental considerations in their decision-making process. Here we're improving because the FSB, as you know, asked a group led by Michael Bloomberg to look at financial disclosure, not financial disclosure, let's say, could we call it maybe carbonic disclosure? The green side of the balance sheet. And that was new, but is working, and is working on the basis of a voluntary set of disclosures which do not necessarily stem from the fact that the central banks or the regulators have actually regulated or ruled, but basically they are becoming best practices, just like when you say we're an equal opportunity employer. We are green, or we are fair, we are transparent. You know, it goes into the business ethics, yes, but it also is good business. This is, if you can wed the two, a survey of more than 100 institutional investors by Hermes Investment Management found that nearly half of respondents believe that pension funds should focus exclusively on maximizing financial benefits to beneficiaries, for example. So again, if that's your only focus, then it means no matter what. And again, this is what people believe. Furthermore, of the estimated 80,000 multinational companies that there are in the world today, only around 5 to 10,000, that is, one sixth, one seventh, one eighth, are estimated to publish environmental and social performance reports. This lack of meaningful information prevents financial institutions from making responsible decisions with respect to their investments. Now, you also have to understand, here we talk about these financial instruments as if it were, our day-to-day. Well, because it is. For the man on the street, for the woman on the street, for the young men and women on the street, this is almost like, obscure. This is dark. They can't fathom the intrinsically complex questions having to do with finance. And also because, as I was telling Francois in our bilateral a moment ago, we just have to continue to work on financial education so that when we would be having a conversation like this, everybody would know exactly what's going on because we're taking financial decisions of every single kind every day. And we either believe we know or we're not aware of the fact that we don't know. And both are very serious because the providers of the services are so overwhelming in the presentation of their services. So this is where you all come in, and particularly our laureates. Let me share with you some examples of how the OECD is supporting the financial sector and the broader business community to improve integrity and restore the trust of the people. First, the OECD is supporting the financial sector to improve corporate governance, critical to prevent corporate misconduct and to rebuilding trust in private business. The OECD has partnered with the G20 to produce the revised and updated G20/OECD Principles of Corporate Governance. They used to be called OECD Principles of Corporate Government. Now they have the G20 in front, which means we got 3 billion more people as clients. It's good. They provide globally recognized standards on transparency, accountability, and business integrity. A strong disclosure regime can help attract capital and maintain confidence in the capital markets. And this is a core message of the principles. Now, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. This is why we're working with the Financial Stability Board on improving the governance of financial firms to address misconduct risk in the financial sector, going beyond financial disclosure to also cover environment, but also to cover gender issues, to cover issues of the provenance of the human resources, etc. Second, we're promoting responsible business conduct, more generally. The OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises were the first international corporate responsibility instrument to incorporate risk-based due diligence into major areas of business responsibility. And we're now developing due diligence for a number of sectors, including the financial sector, to help companies identify and manage the social and environmental risks in their own supply chains. We also have a lot better access to micro data. We're now dealing with tens of thousands of data from tens of thousands of individual companies, and that also gives it a sense of reality and a sense of dealing with the real companies rather than with principles or general recommendations. Third, we're fighting corruption in international business openly. Thanks to the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention, which, by the way, turned 20. It's still a young lady. Our Anti-Bribery Convention turned 20 last year, 2017. There are 500 ongoing investigations into alleged acts of foreign bribery in 29 countries. And actually, was it, Ambassador, 2 years ago when we disclosed the first 429 cases of anti-bribery that were actually identified, for which there were sentences, etc. And you could see there, I have to say, the very asymmetrical reports, because there were some countries like in the United States where maybe of the 429, there were more than 100 cases, and there were still maybe a dozen countries which are either chemically pure and have discovered and should clone the perfect banker, individual, regulator, etc., or they do not have the political will to investigate the cases. So, whatever the reason is, if they should be cloned, they should be cloned, you know. But if not, and our view is that it's probably for the wrong reason that they haven't found a single case, they still have to jump on the bandwagon, but it's never too late. Because this is one big issue about level playing field, by the way. If the demands on a particular country, on a particular set of countries, are greater than on others, that creates a level, you know, a playing field that is not level. And it's just like demands on environment, demands on labor, demands on taxes, they should all be the same. Well, the same thing here. Question of transparency, corruption just applies. And it's a very, very important part. And it should be demanded by the authorities of the countries themselves. And then, of course, last but not least, we're tackling tax evasion and avoidance. Why? Well, because this is, you know, ethically absolutely necessary, morally, politically, but it's also economically necessary. The so-called BEPS, base erosion profit shifting, mostly by multinationals, that has a potential, if we get it right, and we're in the process of producing about 240 billion per year. Now that's real money, huh? We strive to get a little extra all the time to reduce the deficits, stimulate the economy. Here we're talking about 240 billion. And then on the automatic exchange of tax information, this applies to individuals, about tax havens, etc. We're talking about already in the coffers, more than 85 billion euros, about $100 billion that have already been paid. These are taxes, not the principal amount. The principal amount run into the hundreds of billions of trillions. But the taxes, where when people understood that it was inevitable, then they started going to the tax man or woman and saying, Mr. Taxman, in the hypothetical case of a hypothetical citizen who would hypothetically have created a hypothetical account in a hypothetical tax haven, what could we hypothetically do? And then the taxman would say, well, we could hypothetically put you in jail. No. What they did appropriately was to say, the taxman does not want to put people in jail. What they want is people to pay taxes. Therefore, let's strike a reasonable, realistic deal in terms of the back payment, but also in terms of normalizing. So effectively, this account, which has produced 85 billion euros, $100 billion, effectively should dry up. We will be so successful when it's zero, because it means nobody else is coming in from the dark and saying, I'd like to register. And right now, after these windows of opportunities and these amnesties, etc., we should really, lay down hard on those that remain because they were given an opportunity. So it's all about the perception. I mean, how does a man on the street feel that the richest men and women in his or her country are not paying taxes because they can take it to a tax haven, or that the largest companies are not paying taxes because they're taking it to, one country and then to another, and in the end they split the flows into one of dividends who don't have to pay taxes, and the other was interest, which are even not only don't pay taxes, they're tax deductible, and end up paying, like we saw in some multinationals, 0.05%, 1/20th of 1%, as we recently saw in the cases where Margaret Vestager has been paying bras de fer with some of these companies. So it's not about loading them more, it's about them simply paying their fair share. And it has to do with the ethics and the perception, because the willingness to go in the direction of what is due is directly related to your perception about the fact that everybody else is doing it. Otherwise, then you say, why should I? And it's not French, it's not Japanese, it's not American or Mexican, it's human nature. There's nobody who is intrinsically more honest and more corrupt. It's about the opportunities. It's about how the regulations are set. How mandatory are they? How can they be observed? And the possibility of getting caught and getting sanctioned. So, dear friends, there is in all these issues a crucial ethical element beyond the economic perspective, whether by error, by neglect, or by choosing to engage in reckless risk-taking. Many institutions engage in what can only be termed misconduct. Ethical leadership is in high demand in finance, like it is in politics, by the way. Albert Camus famously argued that l'intégrité n'a pas besoin de règles. It probably sounds more elegant than it is effective. He's right, of course. We should never fight with Camus, not in France at least. But experience shows the value of building rules and procedures to steer behavior in the right direction and to discourage deviations when ethics are weak. Such frameworks facilitate compliance. They facilitate monitoring, and they help us back. Again, they help us back with the trust issue, the rebuilding of the trust issue. So I'm confident that some of the innovative ideas, including in the essays competing for today's prize, will help us to go in that direction. Count on the OECD to support you every step of the way in the design, the development, and the delivery of better ethics rules for a better life. Thank you very much.
We have to move to the second part of the ceremony, which is the roundtable conversation. And I may ask our four panelists to move to the stage. So Josina Kamerling, she is co-president of the prize, but she is also, in day life, the head of regulatory outreach for Europe at the CFA Institute, and Josina is based in Brussels. Dominique Jacquet, who is a professor of economics and corporate finance and head of economics and finance at l'École des Ponts here in Paris. Colin Morrison, who is deputy chief of Chartered Banker Institute in London and president of the European Bank Training Network in London, and Pascal Cescon, who is the chief ethics officer of the Banque de France and was previously labor relations director and a member of Human Resources Committee of the European System of Central Banks. We have heard a lot of insightful thoughts. We read also the essays of the laureates and others, and about ethics and trust, finance, crisis, rebuilding, and looking also forward because the technology and the world are moving. So I would like to start with a general question to each of you in sequence. The general question is, we have the impression that we all agree that ethics matters, that maybe ethics is back in the financial sector. But can we say really that the problem is over, or there are things that remain to be done? We have seen it at the OECD agenda. There are plenty of things to be done. What on our agenda, on training institutions, research institutions, professional bodies, within large organizations? So what remains to be done, and who should be in charge of it? Maybe we'd start with Josina.
Thank you very much, Paul. And it's a real pleasure to be here, and it's so nice to see the finalists there, so we welcome you. And thank you very much to the Banque de France and to the OECD for being here tonight. I want to take you very quickly to a study CFA did together with the Economist Intelligence Unit in 2014, when we looked at the state of affairs of ethics and in the financial profession. What came out of all the interviews between high and low, and it was interesting that the governor picked on the high and also the low in let's say, in finance, that you need action on both sides. What came out was that where everybody said, we want to work for ethical institutions, 53% of those interviewed said, but we plan to be ethically creative and we plan to be flexible if we need to further our careers. So what does that say? That says that there is a general recognition that ethics is important, and that following the financial crisis, we need to recognize and we need to say we're ethical, we have ethical codes. But do we act on it? Now, in the last year at CFA Institute, we have taken further steps. So we have, of course, ethics in our exam. It's an integral part, and we subscribe yearly to ethics and retake the vows, I would say. But more importantly is the next step, is to give voice and to take action. And this is the hard part. This is the hard part for the young people. At the top, you can say, we have established an ethical code, we're doing fine, everybody's very ethical here. But the young people coming in, they find it very hard. They know, everybody has a moral sense, most people, I would say. But what is hard to do is what you do when you see an ethical misbehavior. Where do you go? Who do you talk to? Now, that came up in some of the essays, and I found that very interesting, that the young people are picking up on this. So at CFA, we want to give voice and what we call go to ethical action, and we work together with Professor Mary Gentili on this. So, but I will talk more on that because I know we don't have that much time.
Thank you for being here. It's an honor, it's a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to participate to this, not only this ceremony, but also to the whole process about reading and commenting papers. I'm in charge of economics and finance in an engineering school, civil engineering, École des Ponts, very old one. And we started teaching economics and finance in the middle of the 19th century because in terms of projects and infrastructure, it's just impossible to build a transportation infrastructure, bridge, etc., without taking into account stakeholders. And of course, shareholders are important persons, right? I'm not going to neglect that as a professor of corporate finance, but stakeholders also are quite important, and everybody has to be treated in a quite fair way. So this is absolutely fundamental. This is always what we teach to our students. Now, one of the characteristics of this school, of this institution, is that the reputation is good enough so that students get a job before they complete the job, right? They have the average time it takes to get a job is -3 months. So the good news is that they have the choice. And what's very interesting to observe is because of reputation, because of social networks, because of information, because of etc., they can select the company they are going to work for. And so this is, okay, this is an extremely favorable situation, but there are a few companies which are, quotes, blacklisted, which mean that they say, I will never work for this kind of company because this is what they do. And this is a message of hope, because we all know that we are going to live in a world in which talent is going to be scarce, skills are going to be fundamental, etc., etc. And what is very interesting is that nice companies, fair companies, ethical companies are going to be selected by people against some others. There will be always people who don't care about anything but making as much money as possible, whatever the way, right? But what is interesting is that there is a growing awareness in the population of students. I would like to work in a company. I'm ready to make less, which is probably not what's going to happen in the future, by the way. But I'm ready to make less, but I would like to be able to be proud of the company in which I work. So at École des Ponts, we try to insist a little bit on that. But also what is interesting is that I very often teach in executive education seminars. And this is a growing awareness, not only of people in their early 20s or whatsoever, but a number of people are more and more willing. And the companies, maybe I'm lucky, but the companies I work for, when I design programs, they are more and more saying, you have to say to people and you have to demonstrate to people that in a real situation where things are sometimes a little bit fuzzy, it is important that they know that there are a few things you cannot do, right? And the day you don't know, etc., you have to refer to a compliance officer, an ethics officer, or whatsoever, right? But it is a growing awareness, and this is very good news.
So 2 pieces of good news. What
Yes.
about you, Colin?
Thanks. Thanks, and thanks so much for the invite here. It's a real privilege to be here in Paris and to be at this event. And congratulations to the finalists, and wish you well with that. I think, in answer to your question, I think when we look back at banking and what happened, and I still think, you know, particularly in the UK, and I'm sure it's like this elsewhere as well, but I think people who are bankers are still embarrassed to be bankers. You know, if you go along to a party or whatever, you don't like to admit you're a banker because people will see you as being someone who's caused this economic collapse, etc. And I think that one thing that we've been trying to do at our institute is really to try and get bankers to take pride in what they do, because what bankers do is actually very, very important in terms of the economic cycle. And I think that if we as bankers can't be proud of what we do, then how can we expect people to have faith and trust in us? So I think there's quite a big step still to take to try and get that pride back in the individual banker and the pride back in the profession. And I think it's important to stress that we still regard banking as a profession. There are some people who don't seem to think that, but we very much see it as a profession. And even though we live in a technology-led world, we still see the human capital aspects of banking as being crucially important. So although we have all this technology and Bitcoin, all these things, it's the human capital that will drive us forward and keep the banking profession being innovative and moving forward there. So I just see that human capital has probably been as important as the financial capital. Also, we spend a lot of time talking about financial capital and financial ratios. We don't seem to spend as much time talking about the importance of human capital. And if we can build that pride back into the human capital, then I think we can move forward.
Okay. Thanks.
Pascal,
So,
this general question, but could you please hold the mic, because otherwise it's
Yeah.
not going to be recorded. Yeah.
so maybe I will disappoint you a bit. Each year there is a poll made by the network of ethics officers of the largest companies in Paris. And the results were released last Friday. And it appeared that, for example, 50% of the staff of these largest companies have benefited from making awareness of the staff. So the good point is the majority, it was 52. Great point, majority. But it's very disappointing. It should be 100% minus the newcomers. So the battle is not won, huh? As you asked the question. No, it's not won, because everything is in implementation. You, as the governor said, you can have a code. You can have a training and making awareness program. But where it goes is more important. You could be very proud because you have these tools, but are you sure everybody is touched? It's not the case. And then, if you touch everybody, are you sure they listened? Are you sure they heard what you thought they had to hear? So you need assessment also about the understanding. And then you need another thing, which is more complicated. It's not only I have been invited, I listened, I understood, but then I apply. And how do you know it? Not waiting for the first new scandal, of course, in your institution. On a day-to-day life, how are you sure? So there is a quote from a sociologist in France, Aron, who said, I knew it, but I didn't believe it, so I didn't know it. Because knowing is not enough. You have to integrate it in your very heart, as to behave when the case comes as you should behave. And in that case, as the governor said, you don't have time to think about it. If you have to go to your files, you don't. If you have to know the rules, you don't. You have to go the good way without thinking. So it's hard work, and it's never-ending work.
Thank you very much for these insights. I will add just one word to what you said. Some of the research we have been conducting in Switzerland on a global sample was to show that language is also important. So knowing, but really understanding requires a command of deep command of language. So this is the reason why we are developing linguistic chapters within the prize, because the expression, the feeling of the seriosity of a situation, one can be technical, it goes through technical language, in many cases English. When it goes to emotional dimension, then you need to use a language that you really fully master. It's not all English for everyone. Okay, so let's go for a second round of this conversation with more specific issues. Josina, I know that you are very much concerned, not about the process of catching up, but also of preparing new standards, new approaches to what the technology in the financial sector is going to bring us in the next years or decades. So what are your insights into it? What are the avenues? What are the suggestions? And we have had a number of papers looking forward from the technological perspective. Some of them are here to be laureated.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, the technology is upon us. Some people call it a game changer. Some people call it a bigger game changer than Brexit, dare we believe it. Now, the problem that we face, and I talk to a lot of regulators around Europe and in the world at different meetings, the problem we face is that we are living in today's world, dealing with the past, but the future is already there. So how can a regulator and policymaker deal with these three cases in one piece of legislation? It's impossible. And this is something that comes in at a time. We work together with the Edelman Trust, and we do trust surveys where we look at what investors think around the globe. The latest one, 2017, signals a clear preoccupation with the failing of institutions. And there's a feeling, this is sort of individually, there's a feeling of we are being failed by politics, there's still things aren't right, we keep seeing scandals, as Mr. Gurria said, and it hasn't stopped. Every time you take up a lid and something else creeps out. At the same time, regulation, the bankers say, regulation upon regulation keeps coming. So when does it stop? Everybody who is in finance has opened their newspapers and looked at what MiFID. Now, MiFID seems to be the devil incarnate, because MiFID is destroying the market. MiFID is destroying everything. MiFID wanted to be transparent. But at the same time, MiFID is a reaction against what happened during the crisis. And it is entirely valid reaction. But MiFID happens at a time when fintech has come upon us. When you see Alibaba in Asia selling financial products and passing data to the Chinese government. Wow, we are in some other millennium than the traditional financial advice system. So it's having to marry that. We did a survey on fintech globally with our members, 140,000 members, and clearly, robo-advice within the financial advice is going to be a game changer. Now, it's an opportunity. And Paul, I would say fintech as a game changer is both an opportunity and a threat. And this also doesn't facilitate regulation and policy making, because on the one hand, you don't want to stifle innovation. We badly need innovation. We need to make banking sexy. Let's put it like that. I can say it, I'm a woman. But it is really necessary and to go with innovation, to get fresh blood, to look at things in a different perspective. But at the same time, we also know that data sharing, data protection, financial advice. I mean, I have seen cases in the UK where through crowdfunding, old age pensioners are being targeted. And what are these crowdfunding platforms saying? They say, oh, we are like a fourth pillar of the pension. Just use us as a top-up. So that implies stability, interest, it implies a whole different world than what crowdfunding might actually be and mean to these old age pensioners. So we really have to target, and we need different dialogues. I was sitting in one forum with a lot of different bankers from Europe, and I was thinking, we're all middle-aged. We need to be young. So there you go. We need to have young people. We need to be in touch. We need young people to come and brainstorm. How many times do I sit in advisory committees with middle-aged people like myself? I mean, you know, yes, fine. And I'm young. I have an 11-year-old daughter, so she is far more advanced than I am technologically. But still, we have challenges. So we have the demographic trend that is coming, that is working against us. We are in a low interest rate environment. We have a failure of institutions. Is fintech going to be the panacea that is going to change everything? Well, I mean, who knows? The thing is, we have to put it in a framework. And we have to put it in such a framework that we catch the future developments. And that brings me back to what I think is one of the crucial points where I hope we'll be going in the future in financial markets, is to look at what are the rights of people investing. There should be, we have the basic human rights. Well, we should have the basic rights of the investors. They should be written in stone. And I think that is somewhere where we need to come. What are the basic rights? And then try and look wherever it comes from, whether it comes from Amazon, whether it comes from Alibaba, whether it comes from a bank, whoever and wherever it's being sold, we need to have this idea of essential rights and essential protection. And I think that may help us deal with the new challenges in fintech.
Thank you very much, Josina. I turn now to Pascal Cescon, who is Chief Ethical Officer in this institution. I learned that Banque de France is employing 30,000 people across all the country. So how, in your position of Chief Ethical Officer, could you push forward the ethical awareness? What are the main hurdles? What are the main resistances that you can identify in your daily work, let's say?
Okay. The first risk we have is to be convinced that we don't have problems here. Because we are part of the civil service, we think we share some values, and so we think we are not at risk like in an institution, a private institution. And actually, this thinking is dangerous. Because of course we have risks. They are not the same, of course. Maybe financially it's not the same risk as in a private institution, but a slight risk in a public institution, an institution building trust and assessing the others, supervising the banks, a slight mistake, even by good intentions, I mean, in good faith, could have bad consequences for the image and the reputation, and so the possibility of the institution to perform its duties. Let's imagine a banking supervisor, a junior, uses non-public information to have a good financial management of his private affairs. It's a junior. It's not the director, not the DG, of course not the governor. But
may I just interrupt? Because I have learned also that in France, Banque de France is assessing every single company.
yeah. Yes, assessing, yeah, but not supervising like banks, but just giving, it's exact, yes. But let's imagine this junior uses this information, not in good faith in that case, of course, but you know, in terms of reputation, that means that this institution responsible for supervising mega banks is not able to supervise a junior, you know? So, and they are going to supervise Deutsche Bank and BNP Paribas. So you don't need Kerviel, you don't need Cahuzac, if you know these names, to have a scandal and to lose reputation in a certain bank. So the first problem is to have people aware that they are at risk, and even if their intentions are good, they could create problems to the bank. Then the second risk is to stick to the rules only. Because of course we are paid to supervise rules, we like rules, it's our culture. The problem is when you respect the rules, you abide by the rules, you have all the rest of the world. First of all, maybe you apply the rules, but not in the good sense, because you don't understand of the spirit which is behind the rules, first of all. And secondly, maybe in some cases, there are no rules. The world is complicated. You cannot have rules for everything. So how are you sure that they are going? So we try, I insist on this, we try to train our people to understand when they enter what we call the gray zone. There is no rule, there is no warning. Maybe the management is not aware or is not there, and you have to have this warning in you. So the question is not only answering rules, but asking questions to oneself. And that's more complicated, of course. If you ask questions to yourself, at the good moment. It doesn't matter if you don't know the rules. You'll find the rule with your colleague, with your managers, with the ethics officer, with the legal department, doesn't matter. But asking the question is very, very important. And so that's why communication is not enough. Intranet is not enough. Direct contact is very important because you can understand by the, I would say, the reactions of your colleague that they keep what you say or they don't understand or they agree or not, and you can elaborate a bit more. And so the direct contact is very important. So it takes time. I said implementation is key, but time is key also. If you don't have time to dedicate to this, don't say you are involved in the case. You cannot be saved by tools, by technology. You have to involve your time as board member, as manager, as colleague to your new fellow colleagues, etc. So you need to dedicate time. So here we try to give a lot of time to open sessions. So we had sessions for the executives committee, sessions for the management line, and now we have open with my deputy, we have open sessions, open to everybody. First of all, for those more risky, of course, if they belong to the operation DG, I have colleagues here, of course they are more involved and they are invited first, but everybody can come just to have this contact and to have them understand that it's very important for them to understand that weak signals are very important. I mean, if you accept in an organization that there are weak signals and they are not treated because they are weak, you build a culture where those not acting in good faith can hide behind the weak signals. If you take an example in the news, relationship between women and men. If you accept, I would say, a male culture, not a bad culture, but a male culture, I mean, discussing among men, not taking into account this sensitivity of women, saying things we say among men, we shouldn't say before women. You create a culture in which those going a bit, further against women can hide, because there is just another step to make. If you keep this male culture away, those going too far, they came to the light, So it's very important to have always. So that's why I said 50 of the personnel made aware. It's not enough. Everybody is important. Maybe somebody not at risk will give a good advice, or will alert, whistleblow, or say to the colleague, you shouldn't know. You shouldn't. You are the boss, you are my colleague, you are senior, but you shouldn't. I think you shouldn't. So for me, ethics is, and it's very important in the financial market, you don't do everything you can do. You limit yourself. And that's bad news for the financial sector. You have to limit yourself, because even if it's legal, maybe it's not ethical. And so that's the job we have at the bank.
Thank you very much for showing how you try to install the question, how much is enough, somewhere within the culture of the institution. I'm sure it's not easy every day. So we have the privilege of having Colin here, who has been devoted his life in working for professional bodies. What professional association bodies can do in this context of putting ethics back into the financial activity, not only in the city, but across the world, because you are also involved in Asia, I know.
Thanks for that. I mean, I think a general comment that I would make, and one thing that I've always believed in, also recently I think I'm beginning to doubt myself slightly, but I've always taken the view that it's better to educate than to legislate. And as an educator, I've always taken the view, that I would like to be in the position where I put the Banque de France and the other regulators out of business because we have educated people to behave in the appropriate and good manner, that they do the right thing. But I have to say that in the past 10 years I've begun to doubt myself in that, having seen what's happened. But in terms of our professional body, I mean, the Chartered Banking Institute, we used to be the Chartered Institute of Bankers in Scotland, and we were a body based in Scotland. We were, or are, the oldest professional body for bankers in the world, having been formed in 1875. And it's interesting because when we were formed, the founding principle was to improve the qualifications of those engaged in banking and to raise their status and influence. So basically at that point in 1875, it was about developing a banking industry based on ethical and professional competence, although they probably didn't put it in those terms in 1875, and one that people could rely on and could trust. And really 140 years later, I mean, our objective hasn't really changed, although the way we achieve that objective has changed quite dramatically. And we have spent a lot of time working with the banks, trying to persuade the banks that they should invest a lot of time in training, particularly in the ethical areas. In terms of a body, we've grown significantly in the past 5 years in that we've gone from about 8,500 members to well over 31,000, and our ambition is to get to 50. And to try and be as big and an influential body as we can. And we do see ourselves as having a fairly vital and pivotal role in trying to address the agenda of ethics within the UK and on a wider stance. And we really approached that, I suppose, in 3 ways. The first is by using our qualifications. I'll say a little bit more about that. The second way is to develop standards. I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. And the third is by establishing codes of conduct for our members. That's really the 3 main thrusts that we've had. In terms of the standards, we led in 2011 development of the Charter Banker Professional Standards Board, where the main banks in the UK got together to agree to develop, for the very first time, industry-wide professional standards covering conduct and expertise for individual bankers in the UK. And then in 2012, we launched our first standard, which was the foundation standard. And to date, there's around about 250,000 people in the UK and further abroad who have deemed to meet that foundation standard. So that was one step we took in terms of trying to improve standards. Linked to the standard setting, we also have our qualifications. And our key or note qualification is Charter Banker. And once you're qualified as a chartered banker, you go through the process of learning all the technical aspects of banking. But we very much put at the core of the chartered banker qualification professionalism and ethics as well. As a subject you have to study and do an exam, etc. And being a chartered banker is not just about doing the qualifications. It's about agreeing to abide by the Chartered Banker Code of Conduct in your professional life, and also agreeing to participate in continuing professional development on a year-on basis. So you have to do at least 35 hours of continuing professional development each year, and we sample that and we test that just to ensure that the members are doing that. So it's trying to create that culture whereby the charter bankers, they're qualified, they're keeping themselves up to date, and they're agreeing by and they're abiding by the code of conduct. And we do have disciplinary procedures in place. So if someone is found to breach the code of conduct, then we will take disciplinary action against them and either remove them from membership. We can't get them sacked, unfortunately, but we can just remove them from membership. Anyone we have removed from membership is usually sacked, I'm pleased to say. So it's all about these sort of thrusts of things of the standards, the qualifications, and then linking that to the behaviours. And that way we hope people will develop trust and they'll develop pride. And I think that the last thing I would say in this as well is, and it was alluded to, I noticed I didn't get a lot of chance to read some of the papers, but just looking at some of the papers, I think one of the other things you've got to have as well is bravery. I mean, I feel that you have to be brave if you see something that's not right and you want to report it. I think one of the big issues that banks still have, I don't know if it's still like that in France or in Europe, but certainly in the UK, one of the issues, if you put your head up, make a complaint, then you're likely to lose your job. And I think that is still a very, very poor situation that we're in. And we need a change of culture whereby people don't need to feel brave, they just need to feel, well, if the right thing's not been done, I can raise it and not have the fear of losing my job.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we cannot extend this conversation to the question of what the Dutch has done with the bankers' oath. To what extent do you have this on the agenda? But unfortunately, we cannot go into it. So I just turn to Dominique, because he is looking often at ethics as one of elements of a wider mechanics. And he so often stresses the point that there are other incentives called counter incentives that the system, economic system, the way companies work, generates. And there is a danger that ethics will remain only a kind of good intention, but will not be somewhere put in motion. So I expect your comments on this.
Well, the first part of what I said was optimistic. Now I have the right to be a bit pessimistic. In fact, when you observe the evolution of capital markets and you look at what happened in the early 80s with the emergence of the market for corporate control, you understand that the role of capital markets, which was just providing funds, is now we have the right to punish companies which are not profitable enough. It's a reaction against what happened in the 70s in the United States, where companies were developing strategies which were much more driven by the ego of the CEO rather than maximizing shareholder value or any value, by the way. Another market for corporate control means if you're not happy with the company, you buy the company, you change the management, you change the strategy, and you create value out of that. When I was a student, right, which is yesterday, the controlling a company it was about 51%. If I want to be a bit provocative, today controlling a company is 2% plus communication. And activist investors, they are completely changing the story today, and they are imposing strategies which are sometimes you have to make as much cash as possible, as quickly as possible, which might be considered as a strategy or maybe not, right? If you consider that a company is credible when it makes profit, sustainable profit, it reaches some credibility, and then the value of the company is reasonably correlated with its level of profitability, whatever indicator you use, return capital or whatsoever, you understand that if you want to improve your stock price, you stop investing because the return capital increases in the short run. Of course, in the long run, you're dead. But in the meantime, if you are an activist investor, you made a very nice profit and you let the company as a field of ruins after. That's really a main concern, because if you want to invest in the long term, if you want to, you consider that there's plenty of new technological challenges, uncertainty and so on and so forth, and then you have to invest. And you have to invest a lot, and you have to protect your investment. But when you invest, the definition of an investment, you spend the money today and you make the money tomorrow. So the day you invest, the indicator is down, and then hopefully the indicator is up. If in the meantime you're taken over by a hostile raider, etc., who gets the money from I don't know where, but basically what's going to happen, you are going to look at the short run and not in the long term, even though you are genuinely an ethical person, but you just want to protect the company against hostile investors who are crooks or whatever, right? And so this is really a problem. And I remember we had this discussion with Paul. I remember a company which was very much driven, okay, the product is not that good for your health, it's Coca-Cola, but basically the company was driven by customers, and then the company became profitable, and then the company's stock price started skyrocketing. And when your stock price is very high and you give stock options and stock to the managers, they are in a kind of a jail, because it is about their wealth. So they want to protect their wealth. They are in a jail. They feel that comfortable in the jail. And the evolution of capital market today, which means that you control a company with 2% plus an intense communication and a little bit of lobbying, is probably an issue today. But if you ask me what is a remedy, I say I don't know. Right?
So thank you very much. And now we know what is left to be done by you, the young generation. We have been maybe a little bit too euphoric about finance and economic activity in the last decades. So now it's up to you to put the room in order. And one of the first steps is the third part of our evening, which is the proper laureate ceremony. So let me, I invite you to join me in applauding the panel members. For showing just what remains to be done and what are the attempts to move forward in the right direction. So now, Josina and myself are going to move to the other part of the stage. Thank you very much. And before maybe moving forward, I would just like to thank our partners and sponsors, not sponsors, our partners. The CFA Institute, I emphasize the word partners. We want to work together because the cause is too important to be left for just sponsoring activities. So Euroclear, CFA Institute, ACCA, and the Polish Banker Associations are our partners. Now I move to Josina for the ceremony itself.
Good. So the suspense should be getting high now amongst the finalists because they, of course, don't know in what position they are. And so you'll have to forgive them if they feel a little bit nervous now. Let me just quickly say before we announce, and we'll go from the third prize, second prize, and then first prize. As co-president with Paul, it's been a real pleasure to read your essays. I've found them very thought-provoking, and I think, obviously, we haven't done justice in a very short panel, but we touched on some of the issues that you all raised. And I really hope that we will be working with you going forward and showcasing what you have done, because it doesn't stop here, it continues. And this debate is very important. So with all of you in the audience to also move this debate forward. So, we don't have a drum, but anyway, and I don't have a...
Next time.
Next time, yes. So, we announce the third prize. The third prize is ex aequo. There are two people who've won this, and let me also say that it was very hard fought within the finalists. So we really had a difficult job. We were debating for a day in London in the final debates, and we had a difficult time. So we really feel that all of you very, very richly deserve where you are. So. Brett Scott is third prize ex aequo, and I call Brett Scott to come up to the podium. Will you please? So before I say something, the third prize is $3,000 per finalist. So it's a very nice amount, which I hope they use for furthering ethics. Thank you. Really well done.
Do you want to say something?
Sure,
Yes.
sure, I can say something. Hello. This is very exciting. I actually applied for this competition last time as well, and I was shortlisted. So this time it's good to actually get one of the prizes, which is really cool. I don't have very long to speak, but basically, I mean, I used to work in financial markets. I worked in derivative markets, but I also work with lots of campaign groups and NGOs and startups on looking at alternative finance and financial campaigns. And in the process of doing this, I often get to see the perspectives that many different groups have on different of how you might attempt to change the financial sector or different issues that are going on. So actually one of the reasons right now that I'm looking a bit shabby is I just came directly from Tunisia, where I was working with investigative journalists who are looking at investigating offshore tax havens and the theft of state assets. And they've got and we're working on how you do that investigation. And actually, one of the main dangers they face is the use of technology by those states that is developed in places like Silicon Valley, which is used to track them and to shut them down and to see what they're doing and engaging in surveillance upon them. And then when I'm with the financial technology community in London, they often seem blissfully unaware of these realities in the world, and they're extremely naive, and they have this very sort of rosy pictures that they put out about technology. And I guess what I'm often trying to do is to sort of show these different potentials. And of course, there are some really great things you can do with financial technology. I gave input into the United Nations Environment Program stuff on, they were looking at fintech for sustainability. There's some interesting stuff you can do with fintech for that purpose. There's interesting stuff you can do for financial inclusion with fintech. But there's a lot of glossing over of the potential negative implications of this stuff. So basically the purpose of this essay was to say, hey, if we want fintech to be something that's positive, we have to address right now the potential negative implications. And none of the startups who are doing it have any kind of financial incentive to really pay much attention to that or to draw much attention to those processes. So basically the structure of the essay, I'll go very, very quickly. I was pointing out that fintech's essentially just the automation of finance. It's the automation of financial professionals. It's the automation of the user experience layer of finance. And now with some blockchain stuff, it's becoming the automation of the coordination processes between financial institutions. This might be positive in certain ways, but it's also raising a whole bunch of questions about how this is going to impact existing bodies of financial ethics. Because there already are a whole bunch of existing financial ethics. I was then thinking about, will financial technology, for example, reduce the ethical awareness of financial professionals as they're going about their business, if they're increasingly deferring it to algorithmic systems? Will it reduce the awareness of customers who are, already you have this problem of trying to engage customers on what their money is doing? Will it reduce accountability to retail borrowers? There's a lot of questions around machine learning systems and so on. We don't have to go into the details of that, but these are very concerning. Will it lead to financial surveillance and increasing attempts to manipulate people's behavior? Almost certainly it will. Already you're seeing this all over the place. So there's many of these questions, and I guess what I was proposing is that we need to set up some dedicated research programs to study each of those areas such that we don't fall into this trap of becoming dependent on an unaccountable automated financial system. And I think if you do that, we could actually have something very positive.
Decidedly, we lose papers today. The other finalist, that is third prize ex aequo, is Mrs. Bibi Mehtap Rose Palan. So please join me in a round of applause. She wrote an essay. She wrote an essay on ethical leadership and ethical legacies. And it was a very thought-provoking essay which looked at the different functions within financial markets. So I encourage you to read it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here tonight in Paris. It's a cold weather, going from 35 degrees in Mauritius to nearly 2 degrees here. So, but it's a great pleasure. First of all, I would like to thank God, who has always been my source of inspiration. This prize is not only a personal achievement, but it represents a great achievement for all my colleagues who work with me, who were really supportive during this journey, and to whom you, the jury, the sponsors, and the organizers have inspired hope. So thank you, Dr. Cosgrove-Sachs, who is not here today, I think, and Professor Dembinski, for giving the opportunity to this young generation to express our views on ethics. So, small story, I was only 8 years old when I first discovered the bank. As a young girl, I was fascinated by the passion the employees had for their work and their organization. You could tell by their actions and their actions and their words that they were proud of their jobs and their institution. And I already knew I wanted to be a banker since then. It's been 13 years now since I've been working for a bank. And today, when I run into my friends and families across the streets or in the supermarket, I must admit I have to hide. Not because I'm ashamed of my job, but because they are going to come to me and to ask me questions about the problems we're having personally with the bank. So this essay has been an opportunity for me to talk about the past values, which used to flow through the leadership and the culture of our institutions, and which are now gradually fading, unfortunately. So my essay is about the ethical dilemmas facing bank employees today, especially with digitization and the pressures accompanying the need to constantly review the target set. Speaking from my own experience of having worked in the different sections I mentioned in my paper, I can relate to the diverse degrees of pressures and difficulties employees endure to constantly maintain the balance between ethics on one hand and customers' expectations along with the organization objectives while sustaining performance. The reason I chose the Wells Fargo scandal is to demonstrate that we are once again, unfortunately, heading towards another major crisis. A crisis this time caused by disengaged and demotivated employees, unrealistic targets, and poor recognition. This is my point of view. Those 5,300 employees were normal individuals like you and me. They were simply the result of a complex equation that consisted of profit-oriented leadership, of toxic culture, and a powerless whistleblowing system. Today, we need leaders and organizations that are driven by values and virtues to inspire motivation and recreate an atmosphere of justice and equity. The right leadership and the right culture will build up honest and trustful employees that will help restore public confidence and lead to a healthy society. So I believe it is our responsibilities to ensure that the system that was once inspiring to us remains appealing to the next generation. So I will conclude by thanking some special persons. First of all, my husband, who is here with me, and my brother-in-law, and my mom, my dad, who is not here, and Cyril and Monique, who were very supportive. I also seize this opportunity to congratulate all my co-prize winners. Congratulations. So thank you very much.
So now to the second prize. The second prize is a joint co-authorship. And it gives me great pleasure because the two authors wrote on the ethical challenge of systemic financial distrust. Very interesting, very thought-provoking. And I call now Mr. Friedemann Bieber and Mr. Yuri Vihov. This prize, the second prize, is jointly for $6,000. Please welcome them.
Okay. Congratulations.
Photo? Come in the middle. Come in.
Yes. So since this is a jointly written paper, we also each say for something, but we will not exceed the 5 minutes allocated to both of us. So first of all, what we'd really like to do is to thank the organizers of this great prize. It's a great pleasure to be here and an honor. We thank the Banque de France and everybody who made this possible, the sponsors. We'd also like to thank the University of Zurich, who generously supported us in writing this and other pieces on systemic financial risk, and the Swiss National Council, who sponsors this research project in which we work for this. So I said already the topic of our piece is the ethical challenge of systemic financial risk. So we'll say something more philosophical about the nature of trust and distrust, and then Friedemann will say something about the proposals that we offer how to address this problem. So in the Meditations, René Descartes observed some 350 years ago that it's prudent never to trust completely those who have once deceived us. And some 345 years later, Lady Gaga, in her song Telephone, compares the broken trust to a cracked mirror. So what we think the kind of near universal truth that is conveyed by these two great thinkers is that once trust is betrayed, it's very hard to be regained. And as we say in the paper, this is one insight that the financial industry had to kind of painfully face over the tumultuous years since the outbreak of the international financial crisis. So there were, as we say in the paper, two ways or two different breakdowns of trust. One is the internal background of trust amongst market participants that triggered the financial crisis. But then there is also, and perhaps more decisively afterwards, the external breakdown of public trust in the system's ability to deliver what people expect the financial system to deliver, what we call fair prosperity in the paper. And since these breakdowns, especially the external breakdown in trust, has the potential to threaten the existence of a liberal democratic order, we think it's not just people within the financial system, participants in the system, that should care about systemic distrust, but also everybody who wants to live in a liberal democratic society. So I already said I will say something a little philosophical about the issue of trust, and then I hand over to Friedemann to give us a flavor of the proposals we make in the paper. So what is trust? Trust is everywhere. As lovers, we end relationships when our trust has been breached. As voters, we shun candidates in whose sincerities we have doubt. And as investors, we avoid firms whose management we consider untrustworthy. So what is trust? I think first we must distinguish philosophically between trust and distrust on the one hand, and trustworthiness and untrustworthiness on the other hand. So whereas distrust in a way is the attitude we display towards those we consider trustworthy, trustworthiness and untrustworthiness are, if you will, the properties that a trustee must objectively have for trust to be warranted. So some necessary aspect that all cases, and I'm going through this very quickly, it's a big philosophical discussion that I'm summarizing, but we really want to get to the proposals, is if we talk about trust, we really talk about a threefold relationship between a truster, a trustee, and some tasks. So you don't trust anybody with anything, you trust somebody in respect of some tasks. We also think that trusting always involves a risk to something valuable to the person who trusts. And it's also trust when person A, so person A only trusts person E in respect of some tasks, say X, when it's in fact expected that the person will do what you trust the person to do. And conversely, distrust is when you don't trust the person to do something. But there's also a distinction between trust and distrust and mere reliance on people. So we think that the difference philosophically between trust and reliance is that whenever there's trust, when you place trust in somebody, there's an emotional and ethical connection. So whereas you might rely on your law to perform correctly, when you place trust in a person, there is an ethical, thick relationship that is established, in virtue of which you then can think that trust has been betrayed. You don't betray reliance. I think with this distinction, I move over to Friedemann, who will say something about distrust and distrust in the financial system.
So, as we've heard, there are two elements to distrust: an assumption that certain obligations exist and an expectation that they will not, in fact, be met. And now we want to consider this in the context of financial markets. So while there's no clear catalogue of obligation everyone agrees to, the following seems to be at least widely accepted. First, that the purpose of the financial system is to contribute to equitable prosperity, i.e. to make people better off while treating nobody inequitably. And second, that agents within the financial system have to be competent to perform the function they occupy and to be motivated in the right way. And the global financial crisis has given rise to the expectation that these obligations will not, in fact, be reliably fulfilled. In the eyes of many, the financial markets led to a misallocation of capital and caused a crisis that resulted in dramatic reductions of overall economic well-being. And similarly, the promise of equitable outcomes has been shaken. There's a widespread sense that whilst gains of the finance-fueled pre-crisis boom benefited one layer of society, the costs of the crisis were fully communalized through bailouts. So there's an expectation among the public that the financial system will not meet the moral obligations it is assumed to have. Based on our analysis, there are in principle two ways of alleviating this form of distrust. One can alter the assumptions about obligations, or one can change the expectations about whether they will in fact be fulfilled. And in our paper, we sketch a number of specific proposals of how this can be done at different levels. So for example, we not only advocate more stringent liquidity and disclosure rules, but also propose that in some high-risk areas, the burden of proof for new financial products should be inverted, taking current rules for approval of new pharmaceuticals as a guide, where financial firms would then need to demonstrate that the expected benefits of their products outweigh the risks before they are permitted to introduce them. And while this could increase the financial system's actual reliability, it's also important to change the expectations about that. So they might change over time. The public's expectations might change over time if the financial system proves to be more reliable. But it is vital that changes to the reliability can also be communicated quickly and reliably. Because, especially in financial markets, expectations are often self-fulfilling. And traditionally, such communication was provided by academics, public regulators, and politicians, but trust in them has also decreased. So, in addition, we also propose employment moratoria on public officials who want to work in the finance industry, to establish or strengthen state-run research institutes that acquire expertise in financial markets, and, given funding bias, to regulate external funding of academic research more closely. So as we aim to show in our paper, distrust in the financial system is crucial, and addressing it will require a complex approach, increasing the reliability of the financial system, but also instituting ways of credibly communicating such changes so that the public's expectations about the likely behavior of the financial system are accurate.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think the governor has left because unfortunately he had a 7 p.m. sharp, but I was very happy to see that he was able to be with us for part of this prize giving. Let us now go to the first prize. And it is with great pleasure that I can announce the first prize, which is for a value of $8,000. And again, I would say do something ethical with it. The title of the essay was "When Banks Do Not Always Know Best." And we would very much like to hear a few words on your essay, which really struck the jury and very deservedly got the first prize. Mr. Babatunde Onabajo, please. Congratulations.
I feel like I've won the Oscar or something. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be giving a speech. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Also, I would like to congratulate the fellow entrants to this great prize. I'm truly honored. Over the last 20 years or so, technology has become increasingly prevalent in our lives. Technology has been recognized across the board as a very liberating force. It's exposed police brutality in the United States. It's recently led to the fall of dictatorships in Africa, not least Robert Mugabe. But over these last 15 to 20 years or so, technology has also shown a very dark side, a dark side that could also be potentially oppressive. And that is exactly what I highlighted in my paper. So what I highlighted in my paper, although it was not necessarily it wasn't necessarily representative, but more of a microcosm as to the abuses that could happen with technology, was the issue of contactless cards. So as I'm sure you know, contactless cards are basically cards where you can pay just by tapping and going. And I argued that this is potentially abusive, and it's abusive in more ways than one. First of all, from the intent. So the institutions that issue contactless cards, they're doing so from a position of paternalism, from the position that, you know, they know best and that we could potentially help you. But as I'm sure you know, many of you, and perhaps it's expressed in different languages, you might have heard of the expression that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so that's exactly what I highlighted in my paper. So banks issue, for example, let's suppose that banks give you a contactless card. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will benefit you. There's a whole body of research that shows that those with contactless cards, for example, are much more likely to spend more. In fact, it's been found that it can actually put a drain on people's finances. It's also been shown that there are a number of security issues that need to be raised and a number of ethical concerns. And I also highlighted in my paper the issue of, I guess, a sense of hypocrisy. So banks, you know, on the one hand, they'll say, don't choose a password as simple as A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. But on the other hand, they'll give you basically, you know, a contactless card where if someone takes it, they can spend to their heart's content. So I highlighted in my paper an alternative position, a position where banks and other technology institutions don't actually judge themselves on convenience or the speed, or, you know, maybe because the technology that is on offer is like futuristic or conforms to some sort of sci-fi novel. But I actually argue that technology institutions should judge themselves on just this one word, and that's the word of freedom. And freedom, of course, comes from choice. So I argued in my paper that instead of, you know, banks saying that you have to pay through this one way, rather instead I believe that banks should judge themselves on having an avenue, an array of choices for people to choose. And this is actually underpinned by the philosophy of what is called in the academic world the capabilities approach. So that was put forward by the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen and political scientist Martha Nussbaum. And although it was applied to economics, I do believe that it has potential positive implications in the world of fintech today. Thank you.
So the ceremony draws to the close, and I would like once again to thank the governor who has to leave, but I thank him nevertheless for his welcome, for his presence, and for making it possible here at the Banque de France.